Right, the U.S. Supreme Court was expected to gather today for the first time since last week's leak of the draft opinion on the Dobbs abortion case that would overturn Roe v. Wade. According to Politico, which leaked the opinion, the draft from February remains the only circulated version, and none of the 5 conservative justices in the majority have switched their vote. Adding this news to the Democrats' failed attempt yesterday to pass their radical abortion bill, this has been a rough week for the left. Joining me now to talk about this and more is Congresswoman Vicky Hartzler, who serves as chair of the House Values Action Team. She is also on the House Armed Services Committee and represents the 4th Congressional District of Missouri. Congresswoman Hartzler, welcome back to the program.
Well, thank you, Tony. It's good to be here.
First, can I get your reaction to yesterday's vote in the Senate, the second failed vote to try to pass the so-called Women's Health Protection Act?
Well, it's a victory for life, and I commend all the senators who stood strong on this behalf against this very radical, extreme bill. I mean, what the Democrats are pushing is abortion up to the day before birth, and this bill would negate every state pro-life protection for the unborn, even giving women the right to know, limitations, making sure that the abortion facilities meet basic health standards, ultrasound bills, parental notification, all of these protections that various states have put in place to protect both the women as well as the unborn baby. And all of that would be negated in this very, very extreme bill that shows how radical the Democrats really are. And I'm glad that it failed.
Now, the opposition was bipartisan. You had one member of the Democratic Party. You had Senator Manchin from West Virginia joined with Republicans to vote against it. And his opposition was very telling, because what he said was that he would support, if you were just going to codify Roe, he would support that. However, this, as you pointed out, goes much further in eliminating all pro-life laws that have been passed in the last 49 years.
No, it absolutely does. And it prohibits states from being able to move forward and change anything even into the future. I mean, it is unprecedented where you pass a law and say, well, in the future, you can't change this. That's just undemocratic.
So I want to switch now to the administration that is doing everything they can to, I guess, circle the wagons, if you will, for abortion. The administration looking at how they can, by executive order, provide funding for abortion if this court opinion is handed down, as we now suspect it may be in this form. What do we know about how far this administration will go?
Well, I don't know. They're going to try all kinds of tricks, but they're against what the American people want. I mean, even back to this bill, polls show that 80% of Americans do not support abortion in the 3rd trimester. And of course, their bill would allow that. 61% of Americans think that abortion should either be illegal or should be determined by the states, which is what will happen if the Roe versus Wade decision is overturned, is that it doesn't stop abortions all across our country, prevent it. It just lets it go back to the elected representatives of the people at the state and federal levels, rather than having some unaccountable, unelected judges making that decision. And that's what happened back in 1972. It's a failed decision. It was a wrong decision. And so I'm very hopeful that it'll go back. But this Biden administration is way off in left field. And I think they're trying to gin up their base so they can have some victories in the election, because all their other policies are failing. We have a ruined economy with inflation at 40 years high, a wide open border with millions of people coming across, 42 terrorists last year, record amount of fentanyl. We have a failed energy policy because they shut off American-made energy, and a debacle on the foreign policy, which has emboldened Putin to attack a free and independent Ukraine. And so the Democrats have nothing to talk about. And so they're encouraged, I think, by this potential decision and think that it's going to get their base out. But I disagree. I still think that people are supportive of life, or at least having a say in it, and having the elected representatives be able to make those determinations in their state, or and certainly they don't support this radical bill. They care about inflation. They care about record gas prices. And those things will bode well for Republicans this fall.
Reason as to why they're doubling down on abortion, because you're absolutely right. The polling numbers make very clear that we're upwards of 2/3 of Americans believe there should be some restriction on abortion, that we should not have abortion till birth, as the Democrats have pushed in this bill. And even, of course, it goes even further than that. But then you also look at the radical LGBTQ agenda, the transgender craze that this administration is pushing. And the vast majority of Americans, I mean, we're bumping upwards of 80% that don't believe that men should be participating in women's sports. It just looks like the Democratic Party has been hijacked by this radical left fringe group that is at the wheel.
Well, they've just lost common sense and they've lost touch with the real Americans. And everybody that I talk to back home in Missouri just shakes their head that we're even discussing some of these things. That a biological male could even say, hey, I want to participate on a girls' team and take over and win all the medals and set the records. And nobody says anything. Nobody stands up for the women because, boy, we don't want to offend somebody. I mean, this is ridiculous. People have got to have that courage again to stand up. And that's what I see happening all across this country. And in the elections, even at the Virginia governor's race, where parents stood up and go, yes, we have a say in our child's education, and we are the best arbiter of what is taught, and we have a right to speak out at school board meetings, and we're not terrorists. And yet this administration wants to turn parents into terrorists. It's an upside down world we're living in.
And I think people need to realize that. The sooner we realize it and act accordingly, realizing that they're not going to give us space to live out our lives the way our faith would lead us as parents, directing our children. That's why they're coming for our children at younger and younger ages. And so grateful, Congresswoman Vicky Hartzler, that you head up the Values Action Team fighting for these things each and every day on Capitol Hill to defend faith, family, and freedom and protect the rights of parents. Always good to see you.
Thank you. It's an honor.